Welcome back everyone, it is Mike from Mana Hoarders. In this video we are bringing you a commander deck tech for some Vant partner commanders, Ich-tekik, Salvage Splicer, and ich-tekik, Dragon Speaker. You can cast Ich-tekik for 4 and a green, you get a 1/1 Human Artificer. Whenever it enters you get a 3/3 colorless Golem artifact creature token. Also, whenever an artifact is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, you can put a 1/1 counter on Ich-tekik and a 1/1 counter on each Golem you control. You can also cast ich-tekik, Dragon Speaker for 2, a white and a blue. You get a 1/1 Bird Monk with Flying. His text reads, whenever an opponent casts a spell, put a 1/1 counter on ich-tekik. Before we dive into the deck, let's go over a few key points. First up, the final price for this build came in at $76.36. This does include the price of our commanders and all of our lands. Now do bear in mind some of these prices will vary greatly depending on the quality of the cards you purchase, the vendor you use, and a variety of other factors. In terms of power level, I'll rate this build around a 6 out of 10 on the power scale. I decided to choose Splicers as the basis of this deck, so we did include ich-tekik as our partner commander to give us access to the white and blue Splicers in Magic. That means we have all the ways to create golems and modify those golems to give them various abilities. Now we do have a little bit of an artifact sub-theme, meaning we have plenty of artifacts that we can sacrifice for value, and other creatures that like having artifacts on the battlefield or benefit us whenever we cast them. And last but not least, we do have a few cards that care about those 1/1 counters being put on our creatures, and we have ways to blink our creatures to generate more value from them entering the battlefield. Now let's go ahead and dive into the deck. First up are our artifacts. If we pay 1 and tap a Barbed Sextant, we can sacrifice it to add 1 mana of any color to our mana pool. We will also draw a card at the beginning of the next turn. Burnished Heart, we can pay 3 and sack it to search our library for 2 basic lands, put them onto the battlefield tapped, and shuffle. We can pay 1 and tap and sacrifice Chromatic Orrery to add 1 mana of any color to our mana pool, and then we will also draw a card. Chromatic Star does much of the same thing. Whenever it's put into a graveyard from the battlefield, it will also draw us a card. Conjurer's Bauble, we can tap it, sacrifice it to put up to 1 target card from our graveyard on the bottom of our library, and then we will also draw. Conjurer's Closet, at the beginning of our end step, we can exile a creature we control, then return it to the battlefield under our control. This is really good for creatures who have pretty powerful enter the battlefield abilities. With Genesis Chamber, whenever a non-token creature enters the battlefield, if Genesis Chamber is untapped, the creature's controller gets a 1/1 colorless mirror artifact creature token. Now this will give our opponents some creatures, but if those creatures die, since they are artifacts going to the graveyard, they will benefit our golems on our side of the battlefield. Golem Foundry, whenever we cast an artifact spell, it gets a charge counter. If we remove 3 charge counters, we get a 3/3 golem. Sunbeam Spellbomb, we can pay a white and sacrifice it to gain 5 life, or pay 1 generic mana, sacrifice it to draw a card. And Traveler's Amulet, we can pay 1, sacrifice it to search our library for a basic land card, reveal it, put it into our hand, and then shuffle our library. Next up are our creatures. We do have some legends helping out our commander. Brago King Eternal, a very powerful commander in his own right. Whenever he deals combat damage to a player, we can exile any number of target non-land permanents we control, then return those to the battlefield under our control, meaning we can blink our entire board, generating a massive amount of value. Emery, Lurker of the Loch, costs 1 less for each artifact we control. Whenever it enters, we will mill 4. We can also tap Emery to choose target artifact card in our graveyard, and we can cast it from our graveyard this turn. We have Hamza, Guardian of Erishin. It costs 1 less for each creature we control with a 1/1 counter on it. Also, creature spells we cast cost 1 less for each creature we control with a 1/1 counter. Renata, Called to the Hunt, makes as though each other creature we control enters the battlefield with an additional +1/+1 counter on it. And Sai, Master Thopterist. Whenever we cast an artifact spell, we get a 1/1 Thopter. Also, we can pay 1 in a blue, sacrifice 2 artifacts to draw a card. And for our non-legendary creatures, Arcbound Crusher, whenever an artifact comes into play, it gets a 1/1 counter. Archaeo Mender, whenever it enters the battlefield, we can return an artifact from our graveyard to our hand. Armorcraft Judge, whenever it enters the battlefield, we draw a card for each creature we control with a 1/1 counter on it. Blade Splicer will enter, create a 3/3 golem, and give golems we control first strike. When Cavalier of Dawn enters, we can destroy target non-land permanent, then the controller gets a 3/3 golem. Also, when the Cavalier dies, we can return target artifact or enchantment card from our graveyard to our hand. Emblazoned Golem, it does have the ability to be kicked and enter the battlefield with more 1/1 counters on it, but I mostly included it because it synergizes with all of our Splicers for only 2 mana. Felidar Guardian, whenever it enters the battlefield, we can blink one of our permanents. Flicker Wisp does much the same, except the permanent won't return until the beginning of the next end step. Glass Dust Hulk, whenever another artifact comes into play under our control, Glass Dust Hulk gets 1/1 until end of turn and is unblockable. Good Fortune Unicorn, whenever another creature enters the battlefield under our control, it gets a 1/1 counter. One of the most satisfying ways to win the game. Herald of Secret Streams, creatures you control with 1/1 counters on them can't be blocked. Howling Golem, whenever it attacks or blocks, each player draws a card. Master Splicer will enter, create a 3/3 golem, and gives golems we control +1/+1. When Maul Splicer enters, we get 2 golems. Also, golems we control will have trample. Phyrexian Triniform, it is a pretty massive mana sink. However, whenever it dies, we will get 3 3/3 golem creature tokens. Also, we can encore to generate even more value. Revel Arc, whenever it leaves the battlefield, we can return up to 2 target creatures with power 2 or less from our graveyard to the battlefield. Riddle Smith, whenever we cast an artifact spell, we can draw a card, and if we do, we'll have to discard. Sensor Splicer enters, gives us a 3/3 golem, and makes it so golem creatures we control have vigilance. Soul Herder gets a 1/1 counter whenever a creature is exiled. Also, it allows us to blink our creatures at the beginning of the end step. Trusty Pack Beast will enter and allow us to get an artifact from our graveyard back to our hand. Vital Splicer gives us a 3/3 golem and allows us to pay 1 to regenerate target golem we control. And Wing Splicer will enter, create a golem, and give all of our golems flying. Moving on to our enchantments. Aura Shards. Whenever a creature comes into play under our control, we can destroy target artifact or enchantment. Cathar's Crusade. Whenever a creature enters under our control, we get a 1/1 counter on each creature we control. Efficient Construction. Whenever we cast an artifact spell, we get a 1/1 colorless Thopter artifact creature token with flying. Elemental Bond. Whenever a creature with power 3 or greater enters the battlefield under our control, we can draw a card. Tempered Steel gives artifact creatures we control +2/+2. For our sorceries, we have Clear the Mind. Target player shuffles their graveyard into their library and we draw a card. Cultivate lets us search for up to 2 basic lands, put 1 on the battlefield tapped and 1 into our hand. Explosive Vegetation allows us to ramp 2 basic lands onto the battlefield tapped before we shuffle. Farseek allows us to search for a plains, island, swamp, or mountain, put it on the battlefield tapped before we shuffle. Harvest Season. For each creature we control that is tapped, we will get X basic land cards. Preordain, we can scry 2 and then draw 1 card. Rampant Growth, we can search our library for a basic, put it on the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle our library. Remember the Fallen, we can choose 1 or both. Return target creature card from our graveyard to our hand, or return target artifact card from our graveyard to our hand. Splicer's Skill allows us to create a 3/3 golem creature token. Thoughtcast will allow us to draw 2, but it becomes cheaper for each artifact we control. For our instance, Cloud Shift allows us to blink our creature. Dispatch, we can tap target creature, but if we control 3 or more artifacts, we can exile that creature. Eerie Interlude allows us to blink any number of creatures we control, then return them to the battlefield at the beginning of the next end step. Essence Capture can counter target creature spell and put a 1/1 counter up to 1 target creature we control. Essence Scatter counters target creature spell. Inspiring Call, we can draw a card for each creature we control with a 1/1 counter on it, and those creatures gain indestructible until end of turn. Masterful Replication, we can get 2 golems, or we can choose target artifact we control, and each other artifact we control becomes a copy of that artifact until end of turn. Momentary Blink allows us to blink one of our creatures. Negate can counter target non-creature spell. Stoic Rebuttal can counter target spell, and it costs 1 less to cast if we control 3 or more artifacts. Teferi's Time Twist allows us to blink a permanent we control, and if it is a creature, it enters at the next end step with a 1/1 counter on it. And last but not least is our mana base. We are keeping things very basic with 12 basic forests, 12 basic islands, and 11 basic plains. And just like that, we reached the end of this Commander Deck Tech. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to hit that like button, subscribe, tell your friends about us, and leave a comment down below. Let us know what commanders you would like to see us build around in the future. We really appreciate the support.